Great things about the upcoming NFL season is Joe Burrow is finally healthy, right? It's going to be great to see him getting back to his old self. And the team's been aggressively making moves. They traded for Dexter Lawrence. There's a lot of people buying stock in the Cincinnati Bengals. In fact, there was a story recently, Jason La Canfora, who you know is a longtime insider. I want to read you some of the quotes he got from GMs around the league. And these quotes are anonymous, but I certainly, he's well-sourced. He says, quote, the last time they had a defense, this is a GM, the last time they had a defense, he almost went to the Super Bowl, and the year before, they probably should have won the Super Bowl. And another GM said, I love their offseason. They might be the team to beat in the AFC. Jason, are you on board with this, that they could be the team to beat?
Yeah, I like them a lot. Can we see a game with the new 7 defensive starters before we crown them? I still think they have a huge question mark at coach. Zach Taylor, I just haven't seen it. It's weird. When they win, Burrow gets the credit, and when they lose, Zach Taylor is the fall guy when it's not the defense.
Professional sports.
Yes, but it's weird that he's still employed. I mean, listen, you know I'm going to work the Jets into every show. The Kevin O'Connell stuff that we're going to talk about with this Vikings, if it goes sideways and he gets canned, there are going to be teams dumping their coach to go after Kevin O'Connell. Yeah. And I think Zach Taylor, like, if he doesn't win a Super Bowl or get them there, I don't. Why are you keeping him?
Yeah.
Like, has he shown you anything, Rachel?
No, I agree with you. And you know the easiest thing to do is change the coach, right?
Yes.
Things aren't going well. NFL is a little different than the NBA because guys aren't as locked in, so you can kind of futz with your roster more. But, you know, I think so far we have seen a good relationship with Zach and Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
As we saw in Baltimore, that can sour, right? At the beginning, Lamar and John Harbaugh were totally on the same page. So we'll see how this season goes. If Joe can stay healthy, which is, of course, a huge question mark, then I think it's really more on Zach. What can you do with this? You have one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league. You've got a great defense now, supposedly, that you had a hand in picking. What do you got?
Yeah. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about Zach Taylor here, because we haven't discussed him much. We've been talking about Burrow. You all know I am mega high on Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. But I've got some counterpoints I want to bring to the table. Before we jump in, Cincinnati Bengals fans, please don't forget to subscribe and watch the full video. When you do that, views go through the roof, subscribers go through the roof. It's not about chasing either one. It's about being able to create Bengals content that people genuinely want to watch and discuss, so we can keep having the most unbiased, grounded, honest conversations about this team. It makes a huge difference, and I'd really appreciate it. But yeah, okay. It all depends on how much power you think Taylor has, especially from a personnel standpoint and roster construction. How much GM-type authority does he have? All coaches have different degrees. Sirianni probably has almost none with Howie Roseman in the building. Andy Reid has plenty. Sean McVay has plenty. Shanahan has plenty. Not everything, but plenty of power to go around. So you're always guessing a little bit. Here's the thing. When this team is healthy, and I'm just looking offensively, I think Colin actually has one of the great takes on this. If you're a coach, you've got to get your side of the ball right. You have to get your side of the ball right. And Taylor has done that. He's even had a little bit of pizzazz, an interesting run. It's not a great record, but when Joe Burrow isn't there, whether it was Flacco or Browning for a minute, a few years ago when Browning actually won a bunch of games and looked quite competent, it kind of felt like, all right, Taylor. He's a good coach. And when J-Mac says, if you don't get to a Super Bowl, then what are you doing? He got to a Super Bowl. The reality is, if you move off a coach, you don't just fire him for the sake of firing. You fire a coach because you believe another coach will be better. Now, if you're the Bengals and you fire a coach from within the last couple of years, what options could you have had? Would it be getting a Jesse Minter or a Hafley? Firing the offensive coach and bringing in a defensive coach to fix that defense. That's a little uncomfortable because your superstar is Joe Burrow. Your quarterback. And this offense has actually been really great for you, really successful. Your defense has been the problem. You want to fix your defense. But it's a bit of an awkward situation. To me, it makes a bit more sense if you're talking about something like with Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, that just seems to fit better. You're going to fire Taylor and hire Mike McCarthy? I mean, is that really going to elevate you in a measurable way? No. So then what about other recent hires within reason? Ben Johnson absolutely would have loved that. Probably the only coach I see making this offense better. The ONLY one who could actually elevate it even more. But still, then you have Harbaugh, Chargers Harbaugh. You could have maybe hired him a couple of years ago. And if you hired Harbaugh, he would have demanded more power and roster construction. That's what he would have gotten. He would have brought in a Jesse Minter. You fix the defense. Your offense would be designed a little differently. The defense would have improved, and roster construction, and so on. That would have really redesigned your team because you're also bringing in a pseudo-general manager at that point. But outside of that, who are you going to hire? A LaFleur? Take a chance on an offensive coordinator? Get a Kellen Moore? Does that take the Bengals to the next level? Unlikely. Because at this point, the offense is really good. Even though I said Ben Johnson could elevate it, and that would be exciting, elevate it to what exactly? To scoring 45 points a game? I don't know if that's the problem right now. It's defense, defense, defense. So firing Taylor isn't necessarily at the top of the list. If you think this team has always been great, but they're not ready, they're making mistakes, and we're questioning play calling down the stretch, I'm not prepared to say that. I'm not prepared to put all that on him. Could there be elevation? Undeniably. Could we blame Taylor for not getting the offensive line right? Again, this is where it's interesting to see where the distribution of power lies. Being able to get a more consistent run game, the power in terms of who's actually hiring coordinators, who's prioritizing offense or defense in free agency or the draft. All that information is largely up in the air. That's why I'd ask Bengals fans directly, if you feel like you have a sense of who really has the power, who's really responsible for these actions and which direction they go, I'd love to know the general sense. To be clear, it's not like I'm out here saying Taylor deserves no blame, that he's doing the best job possible. That's not what I'm saying either. It's just that if you're firing a coach and hiring another, there has to be a clear path. A clear idea of what you're trying to accomplish. Harbaugh, now Ravens Harbaugh, that team wasn't disciplined. The defense wasn't good. You didn't like the offensive play calling or coordinating. You had great teams that came up short, and you could directly point to the game plan, the coaching, the preparation. You didn't get the team ready for the moment. That's the problem. And when you fire those coaches and bring in a great up-and-coming offensive coordinator, a defensive coordinator who we know built a great defense, you can point to it and say, that makes sense. That path makes sense to me. But you have to have that purpose. Since it's been a bit multifaceted with the Bengals, you can't just take a swing for no reason. Clint Kubiak is available to be hired now. Does firing Taylor and hiring Clint Kubiak solve the problems? No. Necessarily. Not at all, really. Could it maybe evolve the offense to make it a little better? Sure. But you don't look at this and think, man, this offense is consistently underperforming for the talent they have. You're not doing that. That's not the mentality. That's why Harbaugh, the other Harbaugh, would have been so much more interesting to me. He would have brought the defensive coach. He would have hired the right staff. He would have changed even the offensive culture. He would have looked to run the ball more, take some off Joe Burrow's plate, maybe keep him healthy, fortify the offensive line. That move makes the most sense to me, more than anything else. But at this point, you missed that boat. Out of all the other coaches potentially available, you're going to hire the other Harbaugh? Why? Not from the Ravens. I keep jumping back and forth between Jim and John. But who with the Giants out? No, that doesn't make sense. You're going to hire the Lions defensive coordinator as your head coach? Aaron Glenn? No, don't do that. So unless there's a clear path, a clear understanding, I look at a team like the Chargers, for instance, and hiring Mike McDaniel as coordinator clearly shows the offense has so much room to grow. Hiring him would make a huge difference. Fortunately for them, there was a path to keep everything stable but hire a new coordinator to elevate. That's not always happening with defensive coordinators. You could have maybe gone out and gotten a Robert Saleh at the time or a Brian Flores, but there's been some time with the Vikings over the last 2 or 3 years, and you'd be hoping to find that, which you believe you've done now. And now it's just about building out the roster and letting coaching do coaching things. So yeah, I don't know. This team has been tricky to evaluate. They've obviously dealt with injuries, as well as pretty massive liabilities. But on the other side, with Burrow and company, it's been pretty spectacular, pretty special. Even last year, which was a bit of a mess with injuries, when you actually look at the production and what happened, you say, well, this is actually pretty impressive, all things considered. So it's not a stretch to think that if this team is just healthy, if the defense is just good enough, and the offensive line isn't an absolute mess, they're going to be great. An awesome team. So why do you need to take this other swing to disrupt that potential? The other thing I'll say, I remember specifically after the Bills-Bengals playoff game in the snow, what was that, 2022? I think it was. The Chiefs beat the Bills that year, right? Then the Bengals played the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, which they would have won if they could have protected Joe Burrow for more than half a second. Chris Jones went through the highlights of that game and showed where Burrow got drilled. If you had special teams, if you didn't throw the flag, Burrow and the Bengals could have gotten to the Super Bowl again. But that's another tangent. There was a feeling in that Bills game that Sean McDermott was completely outcoached. This is the benefit of having an offensive head coach. The Bengals had a clear plan, a clear ability to adapt to the weather. They knew exactly what they needed to do, what they wanted to do. That was a big vote of confidence for Taylor. You could just say, look, this is the benefit of having an offensive coach who's comfortable, confident, knows his offense, knows his quarterback. They're connected. There aren't many times you watch the Bengals, and it's hard because of the injuries and issues. There aren't many times I look at this and think there's a disconnection between Burrow and Taylor. I just never really have that sense, honestly. That's why I keep going back to how much power you believe Taylor has with the Bengals franchise as a whole. From my viewpoint, from what I've observed, it doesn't seem like he's at the top of the list as the guy who says, this is my team. I run it. I have final say on the roster. I'm picking this and that. That's not the sense I get. Maybe I'm wrong, and that's why I'm asking Bengals fans, definitely let me know if I'm right or wrong. It kind of feels like management is always happy to say, no, we're sticking with Taylor because we're having some success, he's not ruffling any feathers, he just goes along with what we want him to do, and there you go. Let's keep on keeping on. Honestly, kind of like a Jerry Jones, Mike McCarthy, Jason Garrett situation, keeping those guys because they just do whatever you say. No harm, no foul. That's my read on it. And if that's the reality, it's hard to just say that firing Zac Taylor changes everything. So hopefully that all made sense. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you all think about the Cincinnati Bengals? Do you believe they're the team to beat in the AFC? And how do you feel about Taylor as a coach, honestly? That's something I don't have a strong sense of with the Bengals fan base, so I'd love to get that clarified. Let me know your thoughts. I read every single comment. Whether you agree with me or disagree, let's get into some discussions, get into some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. Please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and I'd absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something we all genuinely feel connected to, something we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, it really helps with visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.